Now we look at Egypt. Egypt in 2011. And so why is 2011 Egypt? Is because something happened there. And so I'm not going to go for the full story, but over time, Egyptians, particularly young Egyptians, started getting pissed off. Why? Because they weren't the ones ruling the country. Instead, it was a lot of old people with their old ways. But you look at the young population, how much of a proportion of the population? And so they started getting upset. So it's what we call an uprising. So there's something called the Arab Spring. So this Arab Spring was essentially young people who've been fed up, who want change, and said, you know what, for things to change, it's not going to happen when we're just staring at our cell phones, tweeting each other. It's going to happen when we actually get up and stand up for ourselves, and in this case, protest. So a lot of them were protesting, and so in some places, we'll talk about this later, the government used violence on those peaceful protesters and really caused even more of an issue. See Syria, which we'll talk about in a future lecture. But nonetheless, what this does show is, like I said, the very young population, but also you can see a cultural preference for males there at the bottom. Very young population there in Egypt, which helps explain that Arab Spring, that uprising that wanted someone else to rule over them. So you can see under 30, how much of the population is under 30 underneath that dashed line. Like I said, those sex ratio imbalances are very, very, very noticeable, especially there at the base. Further, what's happening throughout the Middle East and North Africa is you're seeing increasing rates of urbanization. So not only we see population growth, but we still see, like we see across the world, that continued rural to urban migration. So in the case of North Africa, but more so the Middle East, it's already highly urban. It already had a rather high urban percentage. But that's largely because of the physical environment. Some of that's making it skewed because where else are you going to live? I mean, people are going to live densely in places along a river, along a coastline. They're not living in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And so it's already had a high urban percentage, but it's only increasing. So it's making it maybe appear, as we've learned beforehand, the demographic transition model, one characteristic of stage 3 countries is increasing urbanization rates. It may appear like these is fast developing countries, but like I said, that urbanization doesn't fully explain, probably accurately, this area being stage 3 when in probably reality stage 2. So in other words, stage 3 we associate with higher levels of urbanization, but I don't think they're there yet. I mean, the higher rates of urbanization is more because where else they're going to live. But nonetheless, what we're seeing throughout the Middle East and North Africa is higher numbers of people living in urban areas, living in cities, which that shows there in that graph, the bar graph. And like I said, the Arab Spring is something I'll mention when I talk about Syria in a future lecture. But throughout the Middle East and North Africa, there's these uprisings, and you look at the population pyramids. In all these places, it's very young populations, and young people are wanting to stand up for themselves. But the governments, will they be helpful in letting them stand up for themselves, or will they shoot them down literally and figuratively?